Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa embarked on a 5-country visit beginning in Russia. The latest in DR Congo after calls for the formation of a government of national unity. And cargo plane crashes near Iranian capital of Tehran, killing at least 10 crew members. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live. I am Peninah Karibe. Let's have a look at other stories coming up this hour. In business, labor unions call for a nationwide strike against fuel price hikes in Zimbabwe. And Nigeria's highest-ranking judicial officer to face trial for breaching asset declaration rules. We begin in Zimbabwe. President Emmerson Mnangagwa will be traveling to 5 countries in a bid to attract foreign investment. Mnangagwa will visit Russia, Belarus, Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan before attending the World Economic Forum in Switzerland. The foreign tour comes at a time when citizens are experiencing a challenging economic environment. Government employees are pushing for improved salaries to match the rising cost of living. Those civil servants want their salaries to be paid in US dollars.
These 4 countries have had good relations with us before and after independence, with Russia standing with us in the United Nations Security Council at our moment of greatest need. My visit this time around will focus predominantly on bilateral economic engagement, especially in areas of mining, technology, agriculture, energy, and human capital development, among others.
Let's get more on this. Joining me from Moscow is CGTN's Dan Ashby. Dan, Russia's foreign minister was in Zimbabwe last year. What's likely to dominate the agenda during the meetings between Russian officials and the Zimbabwean president?
Peninah, one word: platinum. Zimbabwe, of course, has a huge untapped, really, platinum deposit. Many of them, but the big one, Dawandale, it has been trying to get that platinum out of the ground for years, trying to get the multi-million-dollar investments that will build the smelters, that will build the processing and turn it into a lucrative mine that could create 8,000 jobs. The problem has been getting the investment and assuring the likes of Russian companies, for example, that they should invest in Zimbabwe and not have their money taken away from them in an unstable country. So I think that will be what Mnangagwa will be doing here. He'll be talking to the big Russian companies saying, look, you can invest in this mine, it will be good for you and it will be good for us. So he's visiting one major Russian company. He's expected to talk with high-ranking officials here, even President Putin himself. And I think this is the moment when we may see that deal coming together and Zimbabwe trying to secure that, or some of that, $3 billion worth of investment, which could get this mine off the ground.
And then what will Russia be looking to gain from its engagement with Zimbabwe going forward?
Well, on a purely narrow basis with this mine, it of course could be lucrative for Russia as well. If they can provide the early capital and investment, the technology that Zimbabwe needs, then they will reap the rewards later on when that platinum starts coming out of the ground. But it's also more of a wider focus for Russia. Russia is starting to look at Africa in geostrategic terms. It sees economic opportunities there, but also political and military ones. Russia more and more is supplying military support to African countries, and it's looking to do that too with Zimbabwe to show that it is the emerging superpower on the world stage. It wants to compete with the likes of the US and China, and so it's moving into Africa and seeking opportunities where there are favourable African governments who will work with Russia. Now, it's still very small scale at the moment. Russia doesn't have the sort of influence and expertise that China has in Africa, for instance, but they are growing all the time. And I think the Russians will be very interested in Mnangagwa's visit and will be looking to sign some big contracts and stay in Zimbabwe for as long as they can.
All right, Dan Ashby in Moscow for us. Thank you, Dan, for that perspective. Let's rope in now Farai Muktia. He joins us on the line from Harare. Farai, what is the significance of President Mnangagwa's visit to Russia?
Well, Peninah, I think it's a hugely significant visit for a number of reasons. You will notice that certainly post-election and in recent months, Zimbabwe's international and diplomatic relations strategy, trying to restore relations with the international community, that has sort of slowed down. We certainly haven't heard it being talked about as much as it was before the elections. And so this tour of these 5 countries, and beginning with Russia, is seen as an opportunity to restart that process, to resuscitate it, to give it fresh impetus, ensure that Zimbabwe is back again and wanting to, turn a new leaf in terms of its international relations. Secondly, Zimbabwe enjoys ties with these countries from a political front, certainly economic, and it may be trying to bolster those economic ties. We know that Russian investors are involved in the mining sector. There is a project underway here that has been on the cards that hasn't really taken off. It's a multi-billion-dollar platinum project, and so President Mnangagwa might be going there to speed up that process, to get it to take off so that Zimbabwe can reap some of the dividends. But largely, it also comes at a time that the U.S. has maintained its sanctions on Zimbabwe, and so Zimbabwe may be looking for alternative partners to do business with, alternative avenues through which it can, continue to grow its economy, to revive its economy. And so because of that, this trip becomes hugely significant, Peninah.
And Farai, the Zimbabwean leader will also visit 3 other countries before heading to Switzerland for the World Economic Forum. But back home, the economic situation is getting dire. What are the expectations from these foreign visits?
Well, indeed, Peninah, you talk about the economic situation getting dire. Zimbabweans are, suffering one of the worst, if not the worst economic crisis since 2008. Earlier today, we know that, workers, labor unions have been calling for Zimbabweans to protest against the worsening economy. And so the expectation, I think, for many Zimbabweans is if the president has left at a time like this, then certainly he must come back with something tangible. Many Zimbabweans saying that we are gone past the days of promises and intentions to do business, of agreements and MOUs. Now Zimbabweans want to see projects that will take off and get off the ground. But crucially, I think what also Zimbabweans want and what Zimbabwe may be looking for is a financial bailout, actual hard money that can be put into the economy to help its position, particularly from a foreign currency point of view. The big problem that Zimbabwe is facing is its foreign currency deficit, its inability to have enough foreign currency. And if it can get some sort of finance pumped into the economy to get the economy going again, to open up credit lines for companies to be able to access raw materials to produce and to get exports going again, that is, I think, what will be crucial and what many Zimbabweans are looking for.
All right, Farai Mokutuya in Harare, thank you. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, judges this week expected to rule on whether to uphold the election of Felix Tshisekedi as president. The country's laws stipulate that the court has 7 days to finalize the petition filed by the poll runner-up Martin Fayulu. In his request filed on Saturday with the Constitutional Court, Fayulu calls for the annulment of the provisional result and a recount of the December 30th vote. Meanwhile, the Regional Southern African Development Community, or SADC, is now calling for a unity government in the Democratic Republic of Congo. South Africa's Foreign Minister Lindiwe Sisulu said in a statement on Sunday that opposition leader Martin Fayulu should be included in the new administration, since President Joseph Kabila and Felix Tshisekedi seem to have reached a working relationship. The new president of the DRC is set to be inaugurated on the 22nd of this month. We're now joined on the line from Kinshasa by CGTN correspondent Chris Ochamringa to give us more details on developments in the DRC. Chris, it's a packed week ahead for the DRC as the country opens a fresh political chapter. What are the key decisions expected and the laid down timelines?
Well, the Constitutional Court, like you mentioned earlier, has 1 week to rule on this petition by Mr. Martin Fayulu. They have started hearing the merits of the case today. They're looking at the evidence that his team presented, and after 1 week, they'll decide whether to order a vote recount, to cancel the elections altogether, or confirm Mr. Tshisekedi's victory. People are very eagerly waiting for the Constitutional Court to issue its verdict, and then they will determine the next course of action.
And Chris, the regional body SADC is now calling for a government of national unity to be formed in the DRC. Has there been any official reaction to this proposal? And if not, what is the likely response?
Well, the government hasn't issued any reaction yet. I tried to call one of the ruling party spokesperson, but he declined to pick my call. And what I've heard from political analysts in Kinshasa is that it's very unlikely to happen. They're saying the Martin Fayulu's undoing was that he entered a coalition with the former governor of Katanga province, Mr. Moise Katumbi, and the former warlord, Jean-Pierre Bemba. Now, these two individuals are bitter rivals of President Joseph Kabila. Among the ruling party, the president has appointed his loyal officers in all the key positions of the government. And so they want to see a kind of a continuity. They don't want a total overhaul of the system. It has to be gradual. And they believe that if, Mr. Fayulu comes along with the rivals, the president's rivals, Moise Katumbi and Jean-Pierre Bemba, these people will have a vendetta against the president. And so they don't want that to happen. And so that's what the political analysts are saying, that it's very unlikely to see a government of national unity in the DRC.
All right, Chris Ochamringa on the line from Kinshasa, thank you. Now, the outcome of the presidential election in the Democratic Republic of Congo has caused sharp divisions among the Congolese citizens. The declaration of opposition leader Felix Tshisekedi as the winner of the polls sparked an uproar among supporters of Martin Fayulu, who said their candidate won by over 60%. The vote was crucial for many Congolese who want to see better services, more jobs, and an end to corruption. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa reports.
Théophile Faraja is a student of electronics at the Institut Supérieur de Technique in Kinshasa. He voted for the first time in last year's polls. Théophile has been following political developments in the DRC very keenly. He wants to see his country change for the better.
We want the new leader to change the way things are done in our country. There is a lot of suffering. There are no jobs. Many people who have completed school are unemployed.
The DRC's previous election was held in 2011. Théophile was ineligible to vote back then because he was below 18, but he's now come of age and knows the issues that are critical for the country's development.
People have been yearning for change because our social situation has been bad for many years. All we want is a new leadership.
On Thursday, the Electoral Commission declared Felix Tshisekedi the winner of the elections with 7 million votes. But the declaration was disputed by his rival Martin Fayulu and observers from the Catholic Church. Mr. Fayulu has filed a petition at the Constitutional Court challenging the results. President Joseph Kabila will leave office later this month after 17 years in power. But a political analyst believes he will still have a lot of influence on the governance of the DRC.
He won't disappear as such because he will continue to be the moral authority, as is commonly referred to in this country, of the FCC, okay? Which is a front that brings together parties from the majority as well as even from the opposition.
Théophile Faraja and other Congolese youngsters hope their country will become a great nation after the new leader takes office. The outcome of the election has angered many supporters of Martin Fayulu who believe they have been robbed of their victory. But the Electoral Commission has denied rigging the vote in favor of Felix Tshisekedi. The court will next week make its ruling on whether the evidence presented by Mr. Fayulu warrants a vote recount. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
The African Union is aiming to reach a contribution level of $100 million for its peace fund from member states. The money will be used to finance efforts in mediation, institutional capacity building, and initial deployment of peace support operations. CGTN's Grim Chala has more.
The African Union wants, in a long run, to self-sponsor its peace efforts across the continent. And in trying to do so, it has established the Peace Fund with $60 million initial contributions. Now, the Peace and Security Department of the AU Commission says it has targeted to take the contributions to $100 million.
We have recorded $60 million contribution by Africa member states to Peace Fund. This represents the highest contribution since its establishment, and based on additional commitment expressed during the last Assembly of Heads of State, we are projecting to reach $100 million contribution by early 2019.
According to Smile Shergi, with the money collected from member states and through the Peace Fund, the African Union has a plan of financing its mediation, institutional capacity building, and initial deployment of peace support operation efforts.
The Peace Fund has 3 windows. Window 1 is dedicated to support prevention and mediation efforts. Window 2, institutional capacity, and Window 3, the initial deployment of peace support operation. We will tap into these resources where necessary. We will also ask our partners to continue to support us, particularly with quick impact projects.
In November 2018, aimed at recommitting its member states, the AU has relaunched the Peace Fund. By then, the outgoing chairperson of the Union, President Paul Kagame of Rwanda, said making the plan of the Peace Fund successful is key for Africa. In the years to come, the AU expects its member states to redouble their efforts in support the Peace Fund to enable the continent's own predictable and sustainable financing of Africa's peace efforts. And that is the only way the continent can slowly but surely find African solutions for Africa's problems. Group Data CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
You're watching Africa Live. Let's take our first break this hour. Coming up. Cargo plane crashes near Iranian capital of Tehran, killing at least 10 crew members. And Nigeria's highest-ranking judicial officer to face trial for breaching asset declaration rules.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
In Iran, at least 10 people have died after a cargo plane crashed near the capital, Tehran. The plane is said to have skidded off a runway while attempting to land at Fath Airport, which belongs to Iran's paramilitary Revolutionary Guard. At the time of the crash, it was carrying meat cargo from Bishkek in Kyrgyzstan before being forced to make an emergency landing. Some sources say only one person survived the accident out of the 16 people who were on board. Several bodies have since been recovered. Local media reports suggest that the plane crash landed after mistaking the airport with another airfield because of the bad weather. Turning to West Africa, Nigeria's Chief Justice is expected to face trial this Monday. This is for allegedly breaching asset declaration rules. Chief Justice Walter Onogen is the head of Nigeria's judiciary. The Code of Conduct Tribunal, which tries asset declaration misdemeanors, says the Chief Justice would face 6 separate counts. Under Nigerian law, state officials must declare the assets before taking office and after they leave. For more on this, we're joined by Deji Badmas live from Lagos. Deji, the Chief Justice of Nigeria facing trial is quite an unusual case. What's the latest on this and what should we expect going forward?
Well, you're quite right, quite unusual and unprecedented. But the latest is that the proceeding has actually started at the Code of Conduct Tribunal. The CJN, that's the Chief Justice of Nigeria, is not in court, but his lawyers are there. As a matter of fact, he's been represented in this case by a battery of senior lawyers. At some point, we're told 71 lawyers actually are representing him in this case, and about 45 of them are senior advocates of Nigeria, the equivalent of Queen's Counsel now in the United Kingdom. So there are arguments actually going on at the tribunal at the moment, and the argument is the issue of jurisdiction. Lawyers to the Chief Justice are arguing that the tribunal does not have the jurisdiction to try the Chief Justice, but of course lawyers to the prosecution are insisting that the trial would have to go ahead, and they are demanding that the CGTN actually appears in court to take his plea, because he's actually not in court, and lawyers to the CGTN are insisting that, well, that the issue of jurisdiction has to be resolved first before the CGTN comes to the tribunal to take his plea. So eventually the chairman of the Code of Conduct Tribunal would have to rule, and there's also a possibility that whatever the ruling is, this might have to go on appeal to the court. So it's definitely going to be a long drawn process. We just have to wait and see what happens, and if the Chief Justice would appear personally before this tribunal now to take his plea. Everyone is waiting to see how the chairman of the Code of Conduct Tribunal now would rule on this issue of jurisdiction, and whether the Chief Justice of Nigeria would have to appear in person to take his plea before any argument over the issue of jurisdiction.
And Deji, the country is also gearing up for a critical general election. What are observers saying about the timing of this case, and will it have any impact on these upcoming polls?
No doubt. The timing has been an issue in this case. A lot of people, quite a number of people have said, look, it's a wrong time to start this process, to come up with this. But then some have argued that, look, when a crime is committed or when you notice an infraction, there can be no better time to start this. Another thing is, well, the Chief Justice of Nigeria would not be playing any role as such in the election itself proper, but of course, post-election, the Chief Justice would have to set up various tribunals now to try post-election cases, and at some point, even he himself would have to sit in judgment over some of these cases, because they would have to get up to the Supreme Court. So there are those who have also argued that it's better to deal with this issue now, resolve it once and for all before the election, or before even those tribunals are set up, because it just would not make sense at all to have you know, a chief judge with a question, a Chief Justice now with a question over his head now, hearing cases, post-election cases. So, but then, I mean, the issue of timing is quite controversial. A lot of people think there's some kind of politics involved, that maybe the executive wants to get rid of the Chief Justice of Nigeria. But the bottom line is that in this case, the Chief Justice himself has admitted to the fact that he did not declare his asset. I mean, saying that he basically forgot to do so. And that's the key thing that some people are looking at and saying, look, the issue of timing should not be in question at all, that if he has admitted that he forgot, then the process should just go ahead.
All right. Deji Badmas in Lagos. Many thanks, Deji. Now, speaking of the Nigerian election, and as many as 8 million registered voters are at risk of not being able to vote in the upcoming elections. The country's electoral body, the Independent National Electoral Commission, hasn't been able to distribute voter cards to all eligible citizens. CGTN correspondent Phil Ihaza reports from Abuja.
At a voters' card collection center in Abuja, the queues have been building up. People are waiting for INEC officials to tend to them. Many have been here long hours just to get their permanent voter cards. This permanent voter card is what gives a registered voter the right to exercise his or her civic responsibility at the forthcoming polls. But millions of voters are yet to receive their PVCs barely 5 weeks to the elections.
And some of us took permissions from offices to come and attend to this. How many days do we have to take from, will your employer give you permission to come and do this exercise? The truth is that when we cry that people are not exercising their franchise, it's because of the rigors they have to go through to be able to get their PVCs. And when people go through rigors like that, they are discouraged.
I transferred my card to Abuja last year. Now, I was actually hoping I was going to be able to pick up my card, but my hopes just got dashed because somebody who transferred in August, their card is not prepared.
During the last general election in 2015, only 45 million out of a total of 68 million registered voters collected their PVCs. Poor distribution of the cards could make a big difference.
Let's take it from the winning margin that we had in the last election, where the winner only emerged by something close to 2.5 million votes. It means that the decider vote, in fact, we won't have more than decider vote of Nigerians that will not be voting. And that is dangerous to democracy. If care is not taken, it's going to get a lot of eligible voters different and disenfranchised.
The INEC says it's doing its best to resolve the issues and says the voter cards should all be distributed before election day.
There are cases like that, actually, a few cases like that, cases of omission. You know, because we deal with a large number of people, there could be such cases. And when we encounter such cases here, we take down their details. We still take these details back to the ICT to be worked on. And we still tell these people, since we still have time for distribution and collection to end 1 week to election, and we hope to get them ready for these people for collection before that time.
Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has reiterated his commitment to ensuring a free and fair election. He's up against 78 other presidential candidates, including his major challenger, the country's former Vice President Atiku Abubakar of the People's Democratic Party (PDP). Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
Drug abuse is a problem that affects millions in South Africa. Often, it is the reason why people commit crime to feed their habit. Communities across the Rainbow Nation have started initiatives such as Together We Can to create awareness about the dangers of drug addiction. CGTN CS Duplessis has more from Roshni in South Africa.
Roshni is a community 35 minutes south of the country's economic hub, Johannesburg, and is a product of the apartheid era. Started in the 1960s, the largely Indian community has survived the oppression of the South African government and recently all but overcome the scourge of crime and drugs.
Not long ago, I was called out by a personal friend of mine to address an issue where one of his kids was involved. And I looked at it, and when I walked in there, I realized, you know what, these kids are my kids' age. And you know, we can't live with our head buried in the sand.
What are the most common drugs that you come across? Are they the ticks, the cocaines, the heroines? What are those drugs that you come across?
Kids are now experimenting with different things, codeine-based drugs, solvents in the house. So it's actually quite scary when you think about it. And that's why I say we got to educate ourselves. We got to know what these different types of drugs are, what the kids are experimenting with, the symptoms and how it affects the kids. So if we know these things, we can avoid it because, like I say, prevention is better than cure.
Hansa pointed out a cemetery on the outskirts of the town where the drug addicts used to indulge in their destructive habit and explains he and the community members had to intervene in the dead of night. But the 47-year-old businessman believes the cure lies in educating the community.
You know, fortunately, I'm living in a fantastic community where people take the initiative. You know, we've got a fantastic group of leaders in our community that have looked at different initiatives to curb this. But however, having said that, you know, drugs is something what people do in their own homes. That's why I say we got to educate families. Because what kids do in the home, the community can't. You can only do so much on the outside. And it starts from inside the home.
Roshni's community of roughly 8,000 people has planted vegetable patches that are free to the lesser fortunate and have drilled boreholes so that water is freely available. But according to the founder of Together We Can initiative, a lot more has to be done to prevent more children from using drugs.
Like I say, we can't fight the dealers. You can't fight the dealers. This thing goes too high up and it's a too lucrative business to stem it out. The only ways for communities to get involved and protect yourselves, because this thing will affect one drug addict in a home, affects an entire family. I'm not talking of just an immediate family, an extended family, and then friends, So communities have to get involved. You know, we need to create awareness.
Idris, is this a war we can win?
You know, that's a difficult one for me to answer, really. But like I say, together we can.
Idris Hansen, thank you so much for your time. Good luck and keep up the good work.
Let's break up our top stories. Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa will be traveling to 5 countries in a bid to attract foreign investment. Mnangagwa will visit Russia, Belarus, Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan before attending the World Economic Forum in Switzerland. The foreign tour comes at a time when citizens are experiencing a challenging economic environment. In the DRC, judges this week expected to rule on whether to uphold the election of Felix Tshisekedi as president. The country's laws stipulate that the court has 7 days to finalize the petition filed by the poll runner-up Martin Fayulu. Meanwhile, the regional Southern African Development Community is now calling for a unity government in the DRC. The African Union is aiming to reach a contribution level of $100 million for its peace fund from member states. The money will be used to finance efforts in mediation, institutional capacity building and initial deployment of peace and support operations. And in Iran, at least 10 people have died after a cargo plane crashed near the capital Tehran. The plane is said to have skidded off a runway while attempting to land at Fars Airport, which belongs to Iran's paramilitary Revolutionary Guard. Some sources say only 1 person survived the accident out of the 16 people who were on board. And that's a wrap of our top stories this hour. Coming up in business, labor unions call for a nationwide strike against fuel price hikes in Zimbabwe. And a series of public hearings on what South Africans should pay for electricity kick off on Monday.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Nationwide strikes have kicked off in the capital of Zimbabwe. This follows hiked fuel prices by 120% on Sunday night. CGTN's Farimo Kutuya caught up with some motorists queuing overnight for this scarce commodity.
Petrol has gone up from $1.38 per litre to $3.31, and diesel has risen to $3.11 from $1.32 per litre. The old prices had been rendered sub-economic due to exchange rate distortions, and the adjustment is also meant to clamp down on hoarding and illegal dealing, which have been partly blamed for crippling shortages. Motorists, some of whom had spent the night queuing for the scarce commodity, are divided about the upward review. Some hope it will mean an end to the long queues.
I have no problem with the price going up, but the commodity must now be readily available.
While others fear it will pile on more financial misery.
The price of fuel has gone up, but my payslip hasn't changed for a whole year, so it's going to be tough. We might not afford to go to work.
To cushion citizens from price increases that often follow a hike in the cost of fuel, government has extended tax rebates to registered operators in mining, agriculture, manufacturing and transport.
Given these cost mitigations and incentives, government does not expect and will not allow businesses to trigger a new round of price increases.
That's likely to cause friction with some businesses.
Mavuku is a high-density suburb on the eastern fringe of Harare. Now, commuters here have already been paying higher fares since the fuel crisis began. But now, with the new pump prices coming into effect, a trip into town will become even costlier.
Commuter operators blame it on hard currency shortages.
The black market rate for US dollars has already gone up in response to the increase.
So it means we have to increase our fares to keep up with the price of fuel on the black market. From Monday, we will be charging $5 a trip to meet our costs because we are chasing the dollar rate.
Zimbabwe's government insists the official exchange rate between local bond notes and the US dollar is 1-to-1. However, the rate on the parallel market is almost 4-to-1. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
South Africa's national energy regulator, NERSA, has started a series of nationwide public hearings in the country. This input follows a proposed tariff increase on electricity made by the country's power utility, Eskom. Last October, the struggling utility requested a 15% hike in the country's electricity prices for 2019, with a projected overall increase of 45%. South Africa's national power utility is in debt of about $30 billion and has also been seeking ways to reduce its liabilities. The Tunisian government is planning to invest in its renewable energy sector. It aims to reduce the nation's dependence on fossil fuel as well as focus on its energy deficit. Here's CGTN's Adnet Shawashi with the details.
Tunisian Premier Youssef al-Shahed declared that the energy deficit accounts for 1/3 of the overall volume of the country's trade deficit, which exceeded $6.42 billion for the whole year 2018.
The deterioration of the energy balance contributes up to 65% of the worsening of the deficit. This energy deficit today weighs heavily on the state budget and the balance of trade with foreign countries. Therefore, opting for renewable energy is a strategic choice.
The country's premier chaired a ceremony during which the Ministry of Industry and Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises granted licenses to 4 foreign companies producing electricity from wind with 120 megawatt generating capacity and an overall investment of $135 million.
Giving a boost to renewables, both solar and wind energy, is a top priority. These 4 projects with a total capacity of 120 megawatts are a first step in a scheme intended to reach a target production of 1,000 mg.
The Minister of Industry added that the government made considerable efforts in order to develop the legal and organizational aspects of the renewable energy sector.
Renewable energy generation projects will help bring down Tunisia's energy deficit. Other large-scale projects will be set in motion soon, particularly as part of the concession system.
According to the Minister of Industry, more licenses in renewable energies will be granted in 2019 to Tunisian and foreign companies. These projects will have a positive mid- and long-term impact on the cost and prices of electricity.
The CEO of the National Electricity and Gas Company STEC announced that the state-owned company will buy electricity generated by the 4 foreign firms at reasonable prices. In addition, tariffs will be set for a 20-year period. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
In Somalia recently hosted an award ceremony to honor the country's most successful companies over the years. The event is aimed at boosting investor confidence as well as to encourage local companies in the Wharton state. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bilo attended the ceremony and filed this report.
The annual Business Awards, now in its 3rd year, attracted close to 90 businesses from various fields, including telecommunications sector, banking, as well as small and medium enterprises. Organizers say the event is meant to boost investor confidence and encourage local companies. Companies were awarded based on leadership, human resource practices, technology, and corporate social responsibility. Sultan Amri is a business consultant from Kenya and says the private sector in Somalia has flourished despite major setbacks, but more must be done to support the sector.
They can take risk, which is a very important quality of business. They are natural traders, okay? So if they get help in terms of organizing the business, then they can do very well. One of their greatest challenge is many of their businesses are informal. But if they organize and start proper business processes, systems, there's a possibility that they can be stable and the business shelf life will increase.
House Petroleum was awarded as the overall best company in the country. The leading oil marketer has expanded beyond the East African market into the Southern African region.
One of the richest persons in Uganda is Somalia, Mandela. If you go to Tanzania, if you go to Mozambique, if you go to South Africa, so wherever they are, they have that mantle of taking risk. They have that capacity of get going.
A leading software and technology company was also awarded as the best marketing company of the year. Its chief executive officer has also pioneered to set up an all-female center to empower female graduates venture into innovation and technology.
We won the Best Marketing Award this year. We did not win in the 2 previous SABA awards, but our recognition today is a clear sign of our growth and future potential.
The government acknowledges the role played by the business community, an important one that has ensured the survival of the economy. We hope to create a conducive working environment for our traders and encourage investors and create markers for our exports.
Stability in the Horn of Africa nation has also seen a return of major international airlines back to the Mogadishu route. Last year, the continent's biggest carrier resumed flights to Somalia for the first time in 4 decades. Global shipping companies like Maersk Line have also expressed interest in operations in Mogadishu, the latest in a sign of a changing business environment. Abdulaziz Bilon, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Still ahead on Africa Live. Cannabis entrepreneurs test market before amendment of laws.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Peninah, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
In Sierra Leone, concern has been rising over the high number of sexual assault cases. The vice has become a silent epidemic of suffering in one of the world's poorest countries. A new wave of resolve to fight sexual violence is now taking shape in the West African state.
In Sierra Leone, rape is a criminal offense which carries a jail term of between 5 and 15 years. However, such sentences are rare. Around a third of recent sexual violence cases in the country often involve the rape of a minor.
Our children die in hospitals every day. If we give you the statistics, you'll start crying for Sierra Leone. If we stop that together, our children will grow.
We stop that together, we pikin and go grow.
Such attacks in the country have sparked outrage, with many people demanding that child rapists face a lifetime behind bars. These are called echoed by President Julius Maada Bio himself.
Hands off our girls. What kind of a man are you to rape a 5-year-old child? I've called for heavy penalties and tough sentencing laws that will ensure that each rape becomes the last rape.
Many sexual attackers go unpunished. The cases of those that are reported often fail to end in indictments or make it through Sierra Leone's judicial system. This is due to a lack of adequate facilities to carry out DNA tests to secure the necessary evidence. Sometimes the victims simply cannot afford the legal costs.
I advise all the men in Sierra Leone to take hands off our girls. Hands off. If you want to marry, you go and marry 20 years old. You will marry her. But even 18, we cannot allow you to go and marry 18 years. We want all our girl children to go to school, to educate, to be somebody, to be like First Lady.
During a 10-year civil war in Sierra Leone, thousands of women and girls were subjected to widespread sexual violence. But even presently, there has been little headway towards rooting out sexual predation coupled with successful prosecution of rapists. Wilkisanyawo, CGTN.
In South Africa, a craft brewery has launched the continent's first lager containing cannabis. Cannabis was recently legalized for private use in the country.
The lager is named after Durban Poison, a popular strain of marijuana known around the world for its distinctive smell and relatively short flowering period. Poison City Brewing was launched in 2015 and produces 5 different beers, including its latest brand, Durban Poison Cannabis Lager.
Easiest route into the market was to go with beer. And an interesting part there is that in beer, there's an ingredient called hops, which most people know about. And hops is actually part of the same plant group as cannabis.
However, Durban Poison is blended with hemp instead of hops. Hemp and cannabis are from the same family of crops, but hemp does not contain the psychoactive chemical agents found in marijuana.
The thing that would differentiate Durban Poison from the rest of the beers that we make is definitely the hemp seeds. So they give a really nice, like, nutty kind of flavor to the beer that you don't find in a lot of other beers.
The decision by the Constitutional Court to decriminalize the use and cultivation of cannabis in private spaces did not legalize its trade or distribution. The lager, which is sold in different bars and outlets around the country, is still receiving mixed reactions.
I don't think it's something that I'll order again, but very interesting. I think the name cannabis is what brought you attention to it, but besides that, I'm not a fan of it, but I like the name.
I don't really get that whole cannabis thing. If you never told me that, I wasn't gonna think it's a cannabis beer. So maybe put some more cannabis, maybe like the smell or something. I don't know.
Many underground cannabis entrepreneurs are hoping the pending legal challenges will allow them to bring their businesses out of the shadows. Lawmakers have 2 years to amend the country's cannabis laws. Brian Toussaint, CGTN.
Many think that pyramids were only built in Egypt. However, there are pyramids in other countries like Algeria. The pyramids are located in the Tiaret province, west of the capital Algiers, and authorities have been trying to restore and preserve the ancient structures. Take a look.
They date back centuries. Algeria's pyramid tombs are unique relics of an ancient era. The 13 monuments are perched on a pair of hills near the city of Tiaret.
Through these works, we're trying to initiate students to the field, how to tame it, if this is the right term, tame the monument, how to preserve it, enhance it, the cleaning process, weeding the site, then exposing and creating a path for people to visit.
Constructed between the 4th and 7th centuries, the tombs are believed by some scholars to have been built as the final resting places for Berber royalty. Algerian authorities and archaeologists are now pushing to get the pyramids listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, in the hopes of assuring their preservation and study.
The authorities haven't skimped on resources to enhance and classify the site, but the population also needs to be involved in the preservation of this asset, which has an inestimable value and an ancestral legacy.
For centuries, these far-flung monuments sat largely ignored, ravaged by time and vandalized by looters. More recently, a group of around 20 archaeology students and their teachers have been working at the monuments. The students have been cleaning the stones in efforts to restore them.
Here, we are cleaning symbols so they can be seen better. We will then measure the stones and measure the symbols in relation to the stone.
We have put the stone back to its original place because it had been moved by individuals for unknown reasons. As you have seen earlier, the work is done while respecting the security of conservation and restoration norms to protect the wall and stop it from reaching higher levels of degradation.
French troops and colonial authorities began exploration of the 9 tombs in 1865. But the understanding of the Jeddas was then boosted in the late 1960s by Algerian archaeologist Fatima Kadra. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
Coming up in sports. Egypt outlines its roadmap for hosting the Africa Cup of Nations in June. We begin in Cairo, where Egypt's Sports Ministry and the country's Football Federation outlined their bid to be ready for the Africa Cup of Nations, which gets underway on June 15th. Egypt took over as hosts for the 2019 tournament last week after Cameroon was stripped of the event due to infrastructure delays and political instability. Sports Minister Ashraf Sobi says that a committee will be set up for the task of organizing the event in 5 months' time. Work has already begun to replace the pitch at the 74,000 capacity Cairo International Stadium, which will host the opening ceremony and first match. Authorities have already named 8 stadiums they feel are ready to use in Cairo, Alexandria, Ismail and Suez.
There will be a Supreme Committee chaired by the Prime Minister, containing all ministers related to the tournament to facilitate the Football Association's mission.
Organizing the championship in 3 or 4 months is a great indication of confidence from FIFA President Infantino and my colleagues in CAF. Egypt got 16 votes to 1, which means a great confidence in Egypt and its economy.
In the English Premier League, Manchester United picked up their most impressive win yet under caretaker manager Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, defeating Tottenham 1-0 at Wembley. The hosts could have gone ahead in the 8th minute when Son Heung-min slipped in Harry Winks, whose shot went off target. 2 minutes later, United then went close. A poor clearance fell to Jesse Lingard, but his strike went high and wide. The visitors broke the deadlock 1 minute before the break. Kieran Trippier's pass was intercepted by Paul Pogba, and he set Marcus Rashford on his way to finish low past Hugo Lloris. 4 minutes into the second half, Dele Alli pulled a fine stop from David De Gea at full stretch. 15 minutes later, the Spurs midfielder was sent racing